have here is a Gibson prototype special dreadnought made. The serial number, at least, is 1929. It's a little hard for me to tell when it left the factory, but that's when the serial number is. It's maple, has an elevated fingerboard. I've never seen another one like this. But this is one that's part of my personal collection. It happens to be a great sounding guitar as well as an interesting piece of history.
One of the things is that everybody likes, and this is something that was explained to me recently, is the older wood is better. Why the older wood is better? Why having, if you have the exact same guitar made in 1960 versus versus a year ago, what is the reason that it's better?
Well,
that it sounds better.
When it comes right down to it, what makes guitars good are proper design, proper materials, and proper workmanship. If you have the proper design, you can actually have semi-mediocre materials and still get a great sound. It may not be as good, however, as if you have the right design with the right materials and the right workmanship. Workmanship we can categorize as cosmetic and structural. If you have good structural workmanship, the cosmetics may be less than perfect, but it can still sound and play great. If it structurally falls apart, you're screwed. On materials, you can have the species of tree. You can have, whether it's slow growth or fast growing wood, so the best wood tends to be slow growing, often higher elevations on the spruce, so it's not tree farm wood usually. And then how it's cured. Is it air dried over a decade or more before you use it? Or is it kiln dried under a vacuum where you can have it ready in a couple of weeks? If you have that kiln dried wood, which is what everybody uses today, then it's not as structurally stable. It really doesn't sound quite the same as good air seasoned wood. Jack Daniels or good cognac or good port, they don't artificially speed up the process. Good port or cognac takes a minimum of 20 years. Even Jack Daniels takes 7 to 10 depending on which version you get. I don't notice the guitar makers with big sheds for wood storage. They're trying to use wood that is pretty fresh. And that's not the way they used to do it. Also today, hardly anybody uses hide glue. They're using modern synthetic glues, which are not the same. And they're using often enough modern finishes, even if they say they're using nitrocellulose lacquer, it's not the same nitro formula that they used in the 1920s and 30s. So if you look at the materials, as well as the workmanship and the design, that's what makes a guitar great. Now we could go on for hours and hours and hours or days on how to do this. I certainly can't do it in the space of a few minutes, but I can at least say that two pieces of wood can be very, very different from each other and even be the same species. For example, pieces of maple or mahogany can vary tremendously in weight. Depends on how much mineral content they have in them, what kind of material conditions that they grew in, and what kind of soil conditions and climate conditions. You can have two pieces of mahogany and one can weigh half what the other does, even though they're the same dimensions. You select for species, you select for the growth conditions, then you select for how it's seasoned. Is it air dried? Is it kiln dried? And then consider how you shape it, your design, the workmanship, even the type of glue and the type of finish. Every bit of that is critical. And unfortunately, on mass production, some corners are likely to get cut. But in the 1930s and in the 20s as well, on the acoustics, far fewer corners were being cut, especially at the height of the Depression. Labor was cheap enough, materials were available, and when the economy is bad, the buyers are more fussy than ever. if you don't have the right product, they're not going to turn loose of that hard-earned money. And some of the best acoustic guitars in the history of this planet were made during the 19th